Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the book club show on Inspire 105.1 FM. My name is Imrana Mahmood and today is the 20th of June and it's just turned 10 o'clock. I hope you have had a wonderful morning so far. I know it's a little bit wet out there. I hope everyone doing the school run and commuting to work, you didn't get too wet and you managed to stay dry, hopefully. But it is a bit muggy and I'm sure the sun's going to be back out very, very soon. So we shouldn't really complain. I know I did catch myself complaining a little bit about the heat, but I won't do that again. So it'd be lovely to have the sun back. But of course, we do know the rain is a blessing as well. Alhamdulillah. I'm sure everyone who is into kind of gardening will be very, very thankful for the rain. I don't have actually green fingers, unfortunately. But we are going to talk a lot today about nurturing because I'm really, really delighted to be in the studio talking about a wonderfully new published book by Q Publishing, and this is called Dear Mother, Letters from the Heart, and it has been written by Suma Din, and I am really excited to be interviewing Suma today about this wonderful book. There's going to be lots to talk about, lots of different themes, but what I will do is I'll delve straight into the book itself and introduce as I always do with the books, the blurb. And just to mention, we are on Facebook Live today. So if you are handy, kind of near, you've got your phone or you're near the PC, maybe even if you're working, you could just, have it on, just to have a look or listen. I'm sure we won't be disrupting your work. But yes, so we are on Facebook Live, so you can tune in. But yes, let's get into today's book on the book club show. We are discussing Dear Mother, Letters from the Heart by Suma Din. Dear Mother brings together mothers of all ages and backgrounds in a compendium of fictional letters written from the heart. This book empathizes with Muslim mothers nurturing their families. Their experiences are second-generation parents let me just do that again. Their experiences as second-generation parents are captured in a variety of candid letters from one mother to another. These thought-provoking letters reveal a variety of mothers' inner dialogues, voices which are rarely heard in society. So just to introduce our wonderful guest, Suma Din is an author, educator and researcher. Her publications for adults explore Muslim women and spirituality, and her children's non-fiction books cover the subjects of faith, global citizenship and environmental responsibility. Dear Mother is her second book on motherhood after Muslim mothers and their children's schooling. Suma lives in Buckinghamshire, UK with her family. So I'm really delighted to welcome Suma to the show. So assalamu alaikum, Suma. I hope that you are there and you'll be able to unmute and hopefully turn your camera on, and we're not going to have any tech issues today. So can you hear me?
Yes, Assalamualaikum, Imrana. I can hear you.
Walaikum assalam. Just to check, is your camera on?
Right. I am trying very hard with some assistance to get my browser to allow the camera to go on. For some odd reason, my nightmare has just happened, as in, for whatever reason, the camera's not, browser's not allowing the camera on. So I've got some support and hopefully we'll get started and inshallah, it will work.
We could just we will go with the flow. Absolutely, not a problem. But it's so wonderful to have you on the show. Thank you so much for taking the time out, obviously, this morning, because I can imagine you must be quite busy because obviously it's your book, Dear Mother, has just been published by Q Publishing, and then it's due to be kind of rolled out over other platforms as well. So I guess my kind of where I wanted to start is just to talk a little bit about your inspiration behind writing this book. So maybe if we start there and then we can talk a little bit more about the details.
Sure. I'm actually just double multitasking right now because I think I might be able to get on. So if you just give me 1 second, Imrana, inshallah,
I should fine. What I'll do is while you're doing that, I can talk a little bit about a little bit of feedback. Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll talk a little bit about some of the chapters that are obviously in the book. And as I mentioned, there you are. It's so lovely to see you.
It worked. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, we are there. So yeah, let's come back to the question then. What was your inspiration behind writing Dear Mother?
Oh, it's a long process and a long journey. But Dear Mother, I think it's been growing. You know, when something's inside you and it's there for many years. Alhamdulillah, I've been a mother for well over 25 years now, and there are so many instances and interactions, as well as on another side research that I'd been doing about Muslim mothers and motherhood per se, that actually brings so many thoughts together. And I think the journey got distilled into this book in particular because every time I read something to do with motherhood studies or just books where mothers' voices are present and they're exploring the whole messy nature of motherhood, I always found, this is useful to read other perspectives and the diversity, but where are we in all of this? Okay, so that was something that I definitely found, it's just missing, and more than missing, not just for the sake of, having literature that represents us, but where are we exploring our motherhood as it stands today? Because it's something quite different to what our parents experienced. It's quite different to what even, one generation above us who settled in this country. There are some overlaps, but we're definitely doing something quite different. And so Dear Mothers come from wanting to explore, wanting to represent, wanting to contribute really to the body of literature in this area.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess I'm thinking there's, like you said, there's something there in your introduction, into the blurb as well, this idea that obviously they are rarely heard. And then I guess maybe, I'm kind of thinking, what was the reason that you chose to do the book, Dear Mother, in the form of fictional letters? Because I found that really, really interesting. It was very just, I guess, a different way of engaging with a book. So yeah, I was interested to know that.
Yeah, I went with fiction for this, and that's the first time I've done something like this. It's always non-fiction. My area has always been non-fiction for adults and children. The reason I chose non-fiction, Imrana, is because it just gave space. Is that license, that creative license. I'm being a creative yourself. I know you can appreciate the freedom that it gives. I think I was quite afraid to try something like this years ago. I probably would have, really shied away from the idea and said, "Oh my gosh, I can't do that." But the liberty you get to create situations, create different voices, different people, that just lent itself really well to exploring a variety of situations. Because if I were to write that, first person or in a bit more of a sort of a theoretical way, it would be quite dry and it would be quite random as well. Whereas the letters here, even though each one is completely different to the other one, they're separate. They do allow me, by being fiction, to just go into a completely different setting, different time, different place, and I think I really enjoyed that. Yeah, so it'd be up to readers to sort of say whether they connected with that or not, but I definitely enjoyed the process.
Well, I mean, as a reader, I definitely connected with it. I think it was wonderful. It was wonderfully written. So, I mean, if I had to pick a word, and I don't sound like a cliche, but just the empathy in the writing, it just meant that whatever chapter I read, there was something that I think resonated, and I think that was really, really lovely. And I do have to mention the book itself is so beautiful. And obviously, if anyone is watching on Facebook Live, we've got our copies.
We've got our copies, yeah.
And I think I said to you yesterday how I kept touching the cover because it's a lovely texture. And my children like, Ummi, what are you doing? I was like, no, you don't understand. Like, look, have a feel. So no, mashallah, it's really lovely. So can you say just maybe a little bit of, why that, and the lovely flower kind of design, and where that kind of came from, that creative aspect of it?
Yeah, actually, I'm laughing, Imrana, because I'm just as pleased as you are, and just as surprised, actually, because all my work was to do with the writing. Okay, and I had very little input in the cover, but mashallah, the great folks at Cube, they chose this design, and obviously they run bits of it past you, and the color. Actually, they run all of it past me. The color and the gold inlay. There's choices. I was sent some sketches, and they said, what kind of floral design would you like? And we have these options. So everything, I saw it in bits, but it was definitely, none of it was my idea at all. So that was Q Publishing, and the director of marketing, or all of them put together, they decided to go for this fabric feel. And I agree with you. I really love it. When it came, the physical copy, I was so surprised, because I'd been seeing the PDF. They'd been sending me the cover, and you just can't tell what it's like until you hold it. Just the finishing, it's got a really lovely classic inside paper as well. It's a real gift book, and alhamdulillah, I'm so grateful to Cube for producing something that's quite feminine, but not in that cliched way.
No, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned gift, because obviously we are in the month of Zilhijjah, like mashallah, and very soon there'll be Eid around the corner. So just to put it in there for anybody who's kind of thinking what might be a nice gift to give, I would definitely recommend this. So what we can do now is kind of talk a little bit about the book itself and some of the themes that you cover. And I have to say, like, mashallah, you managed to go so much in depth, even though, like we discussed, that they are in the form of fictional letters, and it gave you that kind of creative freedom. Now, I think it was part of the introduction, maybe the first chapter, I can't quite remember now, but you mentioned, yes, it is introduction, something about like this imaginary motherhood lane, and then you kind of say it led to a vista fulfillment. And I was kind of reading that, and I thought, again, this kind of idea, how did I feel about motherhood before I became a mother? What were my thoughts, what were my perceptions, and then what was the reality? So I guess my question was, what do you think, as women, obviously primarily because we're talking about motherhood specifically, these kind of ideas, thoughts are based on? So that's kind of, actually, if you answer that bit, then I've got a second bit to the question as well.
Sure. Yep. Yeah, that is from the introduction, actually, because I wrote a letter to the readers as my introduction. And I think that's just reflecting, maybe it's changed a bit now because the world has changed, information is flowing, from every area. But when I became a mother, this was in the world of no internet, no, just magazines, literally magazines, and mother care freebie magazines and all that kind of thing, and your own experience, for what that's worth. So I was very young when I became a mother, alhamdulillah. And I think what I had was quite a naive expectation, because nothing can prepare you for what you're going to deal with as the mother yourself, responsible for this little life, day and night. And I'd had nieces, nephews, and that's mostly fun. And you play with them, and then you hand them back. Or even if you've got responsibility, you don't have the whole night thing and just everything that goes with it, and the tantrums and all of that. You generally get all the good bits. So this slightly romanticized, rose-tinted perception is what I had as a young, 22, 23-year-old when I had my first baby. And I think that does get fed at that time, particularly through, popular TV, adverts, just whatever we're consuming, and all those kind of pastel shade, nice magazine and products as well, where the mom and the baby and everything just looks so perfect and lovely. It doesn't prepare you for the absolute hot mess that you're in.
for the first, I don't know, months, years. Sometimes
Yeah.
I'm in that now, and I'm like decades down the line. But so I think it was a bit of a different world in terms of expectation. So I had that kind of unrealistic thing that this is just quite easy. And I think there's a lot more realism around now because
Mm.
of the internet, because of social media. Publishing has taken on a lot more confessional and biographical memoir type books, which bear all. So I think maybe now, maybe new mums aren't as naive, but I
Mm.
certainly was. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I just probably wanted to echo that because I think I was probably very similar, slightly older than maybe you. I think I was 27 when I had my first, and still, had this notion of what what it would mean. And so yeah, and in the same part of the introduction, a bit further on, you mentioned this idea that motherhood, it's magnificent, humbling, chaotic experience, and this mention of the fact that maybe at the time there's a bit of naivety. You're right, maybe there is a bit more kind of women have a bit more sense of what it might entail, but is there anything particular that we can do, maybe, or society, or um communities, to help prepare women for what it might be? Or is it definitely something that you just gotta go with it?
I think there are some things that really help,
Mm,
and they still help me today because
mm,
you don't, sign out of being a mum once at 18 or 20 or whatever. You're still there. You're still the mother figure, and I
mm,
think multi-generational contact and communication really helps.
mhm,
Um, Talking to people who've been through it. And I don't just mean mothers, it could
mhm,
be aunts, it could be women who don't have children and they're just older or a lot younger. I find I'm always supported in my thinking, um,
mhm,
and challenged when
mhm,
I've got different age groups. I think once we're in a bubble of just our own contemporaries and our own peers, I think that's when we make life a bit harder for ourselves. But if we
mhm,
have access or we go seeking out people who are also from different backgrounds, Imran, I found that really helpful.
yeah,
As part of the research for this book, I remember 2 or 3 lovely conversations with
mhm,
a Somali auntie who's a
mhm,
grandmother.
mhm,
And, we had so much to talk about. She had so much to share about her culture, her experience. Some of it is in the book, as that's why I was interviewing her. Um,
mhm,
and I think that's so enriching because that takes away some of the naivety, also takes away some of the fear factor when you
mhm,
realize that actually across the globe, across the world, everybody's facing challenges in their
mhm,
mothering. It's not just you on your own.
mhm,
You're not a bad mom because you don't know what to do half the time. Everyone faces it, and I think the more we discuss things with
mhm.
a range of backgrounds, range of ages, I think that's probably one of the best preparations.
Yeah, and that's such wonderful, I guess, advice, or something to live by. The idea of community and connection, and what you mentioned quite importantly, the intergenerational aspect. And I guess maybe that's something else that has changed over time. Whereas, in the past, we've grown up in maybe multi-generational households with your
Mhm,
grandparents, parents, children,
mhm,
grandchildren, etc. And I guess that kind of goes on to my slight next question, which was this idea. We hear a lot about the fact that it takes a village to raise a child, and the fact, though, we know at the same time that there are mothers, that we go through periods of feeling quite isolated and maybe lonely. So again, maybe just, I guess I'm thinking, if we're living in such fast-paced, like, lifestyles, and I don't know why it maybe feels more so now than it did maybe, a couple of decades ago, I'm not sure. Um, would you think there's a way of rectifying this? I mean, obviously, I know you've mentioned it's really important to have those connections, but if maybe we're struggling to even leave the house, as mums, or
mhm.
something, like, what do you think might help that sense of kind of isolation?
Yeah, it is hard, Imran. I'm really glad you mentioned it because, visually there's just loads of mums and people around. So
Mm,
someone might think, well, how can you be lonely? But it's such an isolating experience, especially in that first year because the mother's health herself needs looking after. Some people more, some people less, but depending on the type of birth and everything that's happened afterwards. So I think while it is ideal to find people who have different backgrounds and different generations, it's not always easy. But I would say that there are different charities and organizations that they have got local places set up. Might not be all of them, but some at least will have, even a mother toddler session that's local. I think that's something that tends to be in every single area, that there is some type of early years provision that's free and that you can join. Even if that's once a week, it can make a huge difference to a young mom or a new mom, or not necessarily even a new mom. Sometimes moms have got grown-up kids and then they have a baby, and there's a different sense of isolation they feel. So I think those type of settings, because it's not somebody's home, it's not really personal, it's easier to access those sometimes, and actually just connect with. You don't actually need numbers so much as just connection with one or two people. There are online groups, of course, where there's so many sort of national groups for mothers to join online, but there's a limit to that, isn't it? Because again, you're physically isolated. It's you and a screen, but it's better than absolutely nothing. So we're fortunate that there are Facebook groups, there are organizations with their platforms online to connect moms and to share information. And sometimes those are the best ways to find something local going on. And yeah, just to try one step at a time. I think the whole village raising a child, yes, it's a nice idea, but it's not ready-made and it's not handed to anyone. So I know from my own experience, it took time, it took years to, sometimes it was connections through a mosque, sometimes it was connections through a health visitor. Sometimes they can be the vehicle of connecting you with one or two small groups going on. So there's plenty of ways, and I think there's no substitute for human connection. While online connections are great, it's that human sharing a cup of tea with another mum or another person who's got that time for you. When you're in those early stages in particular is really helpful.
No, definitely. And I think, and you're right, this idea of just looking local and maybe, it's just come to my mind now when you're, have the wonderful news that, you're expecting a baby, maybe that's the time when you still have a bit of energy to have a look around, what's on locally, what's going on. So then inshallah, when the time comes, you're feeling really tired and like, oh God, what's going on? You kind of already done your, recce around town. But yeah, no, I recall one of the most, I could just have to say blessing because again, this idea of breastfeeding, I remember thinking, oh yeah, it's going to be easy. And it was one of the most difficult things I have ever done. But the support I got from there's a what they were called at the time like a lactation specialist, and through the NHS, and she used to hold these little kind of clinics and just first time mothers going and just getting help with how to breastfeed and how to get your baby to latch on, and alhamdulillah, it was such a amazing thing. And yeah, so I guess that's just an example, I guess, from my own experience I want to share. Now
great.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, so your first letter is kind of addressed to working mums. A mum who has a second job, I think, is the actual title. And my question around reading, or some of the thoughts that were going through my mind as I was reading that chapter, was that that mothers are always working, which is kind of what you basically mentioned in that chapter, in that letter. But what do we do to then, again, in a society or a culture or whatever it might be, that motherhood tends to be sometimes undervalued, and why do you think that is, and why do you think we have those challenges?
Yeah, that letter came from exactly what you've said. That feeling, and it's not just that feeling, it's manifested so much in the language that people are using, that motherhood is undervalued completely. That it's like an almost like a non-job. You'll get. I think it's in that letter. Is it somewhere in the book where someone will say, "Well, what do you do?"
Yeah.
And if you say, it could be the GP, and it could be quite a kind, benign question. They're not actually trying to needle, but what do you do? And if you say, "I'm a mum," they'll kind of wait. Well,
Yeah.
and what else? So that was really what I was trying to address, that is a huge contribution and it is valuable, and you are giving to society by nurturing these children and supporting them, and all the networks that go with supporting a child that mothers tend to feed into, so many other voluntary areas of the community that they're supporting. And it's undervalued because we've moved in a way of thinking in the second half of the 20th century that only what's done economically that earns a salary is something that's valuable to the country.
I was just going to stop you there, Suma. This is really important, I think, question, which will continue after the break. So inshallah, we will be back with you in a few moments. So assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
This program will continue after the break. Continue listening to Inspire FM. Inspire FM.
Inspire 105.1 FM.
Hi, my name's Abda Khan. I'm a writer and a lawyer, and I want you to keep listening to Inspire FM.
Ready to be part of something extraordinary? Inspire Eid is coming back on June 28th and 29th, and we need volunteers like you. Want to boost your CV while making a positive impact? Join us and enhance your professional profile with valuable skills like event coordination, community engagement, and teamwork. As a volunteer, you'll gain hands-on experience and build a diverse network, from helping with event setup to engaging with attendees. Your unique skills will shine. Sign up today on inspireeid.org. or call us on 01582 481810.
A large and elegant wedding and events venue in the heart of Luton, catering for up to 1,200 guests, with a 5-star food hygiene rating, plenty of parking, bridal suite, family rooms and prayer facilities. Crescent Hall's the perfect venue for your wedding, events, parties and conferences. We have some great offers for summer. Contact us to find out more. Call 01582 723386. Email bookings@crescenthall.co.uk or search for us online and social media. Crescent Hall, Luton. Conditions apply.
अगर आप अकाउंट्स या टैक्स की वजह से परेशान हैं तो घबराने की कोई बात नहीं। आज ही मुकम्मल राजदारी से हमारे साथ अपने तमाम मसाइल, बुक कीपिंग, पेरोल, वीएटी, टैक्सी अकाउंट्स, लिमिटेड कंपनी बनाना वगैरह के लिए राब्ता कायम कीजिए। हमारे मशवरे और खिदमत से आपको खुशी और तसल्ली महसूस होगी। याद रखें, अब्दुल कयूम ऑफ ए कयूम अकाउंटेंट्स लिमिटेड, 4A वॉल्डेक रोड, लूटन। Telephone 01582 755252. Mobile 07961 188616. Email aq.accountants@hotmail.co.uk.
Wealth does not consist in abundant provision and plenty of goods. A truly rich person is content enjoying peace of mind.
वेस्टबोर्न फार्मेसी हफ्ते के 7 दिन सुबह 9 बजे से लेकर रात 9 बजे तक खुली रहती है। हमारी सर्विसेज में शामिल हैं ट्रैवल वैक्सीनेशंस, स्टॉप स्मोकिंग, डायबिटीज चेक, बच्चों की ग़िज़ा और बहुत कुछ। लुटन और डंस्टेबल में फ्री प्रिस्क्रिप्शन, पिकअप और डिलीवरी सर्विसेज भी की जाती है। इसके अलावा आप मेडिसिन के इस्तेमाल के लिए फ्री मशवरा भी ले सकते हैं। वेस्टबोर्न फार्मेसी, 198 B Dunstable Road, Luton, corner of Westbourne Road. Telephone 01582 419 432.
Chai and Chapati, the restaurant cafe in Berry Park, is not like other chai brands. Chai and Chapati offers breakfast, brunch and dinner, serving tea and fresh snacks, along with a great choice of fresh curries, omelettes and fresh chapatis, English breakfasts, masala fish, smash burgers and tender chicken burgers. Mocktails too. Drop in to try Chai and Chapati's tasty new Desi Chai and find them on Instagram and Facebook. Great news, there's a new branch opening in Kingsbury, North London soon.
With famine, natural disasters, and wars destroying the Ummah, join Families Relief and help provide essential food, water, and medical aid to the most needy people around the world. Your donation will help save lives in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. Don't delay. Pick up the phone and call us on 0114-365-4454 or visit familiesrelief.org.uk. Help us keep families together.
From the studios of Inspire FM, the time is now 10:30.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the book club show on Inspire 105.1 FM. My name is Imrana Mahmood, and on today's show I am delighted to have Suma Din in the studio with me today, albeit it's a virtual studio, and we are discussing her new book, Dear Mother, Letters from the Heart. And just before the break, we were talking to Suma about the first letter in this book, because it takes the form of fictional letters about women who have a second job, but obviously the fact that all mothers are working and why maybe in society motherhood is sometimes undervalued. So I'm going to come back to Suma, and I mean I know we kind of got interrupted a little bit by the break, but yeah, what would you like to kind of add to what you were saying just before in the first half?
Yeah, thank you, Imrana. We were discussing, weren't we, how motherhood as an occupation is undervalued because it's not seen as contributing economically to GDP, and that before, in the first sort of half of the 20th century and earlier, the contribution of raising a family was seen as valuable. And what's happened with, it's great that women have more opportunities and have more ability to study, work. I'm not saying that that's the problem. That's not the problem at all. That's great. And women should have a choice, mothers and non-mothers, all women should have that choice of what they do with themselves. But the choice of raising children is sadly seen in unspoken terms as you're wasting your time and you're not doing anything. People won't say it like that, but that contribution is huge, and that sacrifice and everything that goes with it is huge, and it should be valued. So my argument in that letter is not, for women not to work who are mothers. It's not about that. It's saying that when you do motherhood, when you're raising those children, you are working. And not to feel devalued. You are putting in whatever labels we want to put, whether it's labor work, whether that's your what you're most comfortable doing, what the choice you've been able to make, that is valuable. And on top of that, if you're also working, as in working in a paid role, then that's fair enough. You're able to do that. Each person's got a different circumstance. And obviously nobody devalues or judges, I certainly don't, mothers who are working outside the home or working with their own businesses, whatever they're doing. They have absolutely every right to do that. And that contribution is equally valuable. My argument is, don't let society, or we need to push back at society saying that if we're doing the motherhood role, that's equivalent to nothing. Because I tell you what, when we don't do the role, if we step away from that role for 1 week, what would happen? What would actually happen? Then every kind of organization, social services, everybody would descend on us for not doing our role, right? And when we do it, it's a nothing. So there is this angst. Yes, there is. there definitely is, and it's not just me. It's so many countless women I've discussed this with, and I think we all, in our own way, deal with this, depending on our circumstance, depending on our ambition or our dreams, what we want to do, and then squaring that with motherhood. That's one thing. But when you're talking outside and to you're engaging with organizations or people, or just even socially out there, and your role is continuously devalued, then we need to have a conversation about it. That's why that letter is one of those exploring the subject.
Yeah. And, it's really interesting because, again, you mentioned, this idea of invisible labor. And I know there's such a powerful thing about language, isn't there? What language you're using. And I know there's also, I think sometimes as women or mothers, we internalize it because when we're asked the question, what do you do? We go, oh, we're just we're just at home, or we're just a full-time mum, or something like that. And that just is so loaded because we're are we being forced to even devalue what we're doing ourselves within the home? And like you said, it's work. And what would happen if we were to stop that work? So absolutely, and I think that being the first letter, it definitely opens up kind of what I guess in your intention, with the book as a whole is as well. And then just going on to maybe another letter that you've written as part of obviously the book Dear Mother. You talk about a letter, basically as a letter which is addressed to a mother who has a child with a disability, and again, it's I guess a topic, like it was mentioned in the blurb, the stories or experiences that we don't really get to hear a lot of. And do you think that it might be because our communities maybe, and this is across the board, not just talking about Muslim communities in particular, but just maybe generally as well, that we have and we suffer from problems with ableism? And what do you think needs to be done to be more inclusive, so actually that we're able to all be part of I guess the same community and enjoy the same kind of experiences and chances?
Yeah, again, a really huge topic, isn't it, Imrana? I felt so strongly about this, and it was actually one of the first letters I wrote a few years ago, when I was thinking about the whole idea. This one really came from my own observations, that when we're in a community setting, and I've used the mosque because this is quite clearly the whole book is from within a Muslim faith framework.
Yeah,
so I use the mosque as a setting and as an example of how we need to do so much more, because we do have a problem with being much more inclusive, not just in a token way, but in terms of education and awareness around disabilities in our community, in terms of challenging stereotypes, in terms of creating support networks. They're just sometimes, sadly, they just don't exist. And what that does is it really marginalizes those families that have a child with a disability, even an adult with a disability, and they can't then access the many benefits of coming to a community center, whether that's a mosque or a actual functioning civic, a center that caters for the local community. And that just it's tragic, because there is awareness out there in wider society. And we're in a country that, alhamdulillah, there's quite a lot of awareness. Obviously, nothing's perfect, but I think as a Muslim community, we are still quite behind in this area. And there's so much we could be doing, like having more mentoring for those families that are dealing with this, and could do with better networks. We should be able to set up ways that families are getting more one-to-one support from the masjid community, making information more accessible. Even the buildings that we're renovating or building, is it disability friendly? Is there, wheelchair access? Are there lifts? Are there ramps? There's so many, that's just on the physical front. But and actually going forward, like evaluating how we function as a mosque or as a community center, and doing that evaluation in a way where we're looking and asking what would improve participation from those people in our community with a disability. So I think there's so much work to be done. One letter just raises the question of, because they're all addressed to the mother, of how she feels, of how she's negotiating all of this, Does she feel left out? And I think sometimes, as I've raised in that letter, people mean well, people want to do something, they often don't know what to do. I mean, I feel like that sometimes when I've noticed a particular child, and you can see the difficulty, and you can see it's difficult for the mum, and you just don't know, if you say something, will it be offensive? If you offer help, if you speak to them, you know, you just, it's hard to navigate. So that's where more education and awareness, if we can share that, those who want to help will actually feel, okay, that's what that family would find useful, and they won't find this offensive, but they would find that unhelpful. So yeah, just so much more communication and practical steps that we need to take.
Yeah, and I think that's why maybe this letter is important, and actually the book in itself. So, you know, Dear Mother, Letters from the Heart. The idea that, you know, you tackle some really big kind of subjects, but I think what's really lovely is this kind of, it's almost it's a conversational format, isn't it, that you're kind of having with the reader, and it's, I think, sparking conversations that inshallah that we're able to then take, having read this book, and then go to you know, our local mosques, or, you know, people who are organizing, you know, community events and things, and have those conversations. Say, look, what can we do to you know, create a space where we can at least start, you know, talking about these things, and then maybe implementing change. And I think that's what's so wonderful about, you know, the letters that you've written. It's that inshallah, hopefully, you know, that catalyst to get, you know, the change moving, having those conversations that maybe we're not having as well. So, and just like another completely kind of different topic again, which is, it's the 7th letter in the book, and it's Dear Mother, Expecting a Boy. And this again, I found intriguing, because I mean, for example, for myself, I have 2 girls, so it was interesting to me. Oh, I wonder what this kind of perspective will bring, you know, through this letter. And you mention in it this idea of like privileged boys, and how this could potentially kind of perpetuate inequality between the way sons and daughters are raised, or the attitudes, I guess, in raising them. So what do you think, is there a way to kind of navigate the challenge of the way we're raising sons and daughters, but also at the same time acknowledging that there's 2 different ways. I don't know 2 different ways necessarily, but something there, as in, you know, boys and girls are different, and how you navigate all of that, but also be kind of you know, with justice and equity.
I think you've probably answered it so well in your question, because that's exactly really, Imrana, what I have tried to focus on, that in our deen there is justice, there is equity, but there's also an acknowledgement, very simply in the Quran, that the, you know, male is not like the female. And so there are different needs, aren't there? But that letter is actually, it is about cultures where, and there's too many of these cultures where boy children are preferred, sadly. I don't have any brothers, so this wasn't coming from personal experience in that sense. It's not my baggage. I haven't got brothers, so, you know, with 2 sisters, and alhamdulillah, we were given a lot of opportunities. I myself have got 2 daughters and a son, and the last thing we would want to do is privilege him over his sisters ever. But
well, they wouldn't let you anyway.
No, alhamdulillah, hopefully he's not at all. What, with my ear to the ground though, you know, we all live in our communities and our families, and not just ear to the ground, but globally, there is still a huge problem at so many levels. There's a problem with pregnancies and revealing the sex of the child. You know, in some countries, if it's a male, all's well. If it's a girl, there are other discussions. It's so tragic in today's world. And then most of this letter deals with actually raising boys, and why this privilege seems to have happened. And it's, you know, and it's a lot of cultural baggage, isn't it? Whereas we know Islamically that the equality of opportunity is absolutely foremost, especially with education, you know, love and affection, gifts, treatment at all levels. There's no difference in the way that that girl or boy's character, soul, heart, mind is valued. They've equal value. Treatment wise, some things might be different, and even that I can't generalize because yeah, every girl, boy's different, every family setup is different. So I think what that letter was getting at was really quite simple, is that we shouldn't be by now still preferring, as some cultures do, male children. And I have heard it firsthand. You know, there's been baby girls born and some really unkind things, which I have mentioned in another letter, said to the mother as if she had any control over the gender of her baby. I mean, none of it makes any sense, but it's extremely hurtful and un-Islamic, actually, to have this preference for baby boys. We know that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam clearly said that you know, father or parents that bring up two girls and treat them justly, and you know, is a guardian to them, will be, you know, next to him in Jannah. I mean, that is such a huge. Obviously, I'm paraphrasing and summarizing it, but the reward for raising girls is huge. So where there is all this cultural baggage, which is there, we can't pretend it's not there. It's there. I've challenged it in that letter and in another letter somewhere, I think, as well.
Yeah, and I think you've, you know, challenged it in a very kind of powerful but also gentle way, which is, you know, really, really important. And I think you're right, because I mean, as I mentioned, I've got I have two daughters, and I do get those comments as well. About, you know, why why don't you want another one, because you know, you don't, you want a son. And I'm like, I do not know how you want me to answer that question, because it's yeah, I just, it is, you know, it's upsetting, not the fact that, oh yeah, it's making me feel as though, yeah, you know, I'm somehow void of something, but just, yeah, it's the attitude, isn't it? And you know, like you said about the hadith of raising daughters and the reward, and there's so much there, you know, within our own faith. But yeah, but the thing is, the idea is, it's important to, maybe, of course, you know, you need to push back, you need to challenge. I guess if it's, you know, older saying it, we're going to take a slightly different approach into how we maybe answer those questions. But you know, sometimes you know, I hear it from parents or people from my own generation, and even that's when I feel like, oh, you know, I'm not really expecting it. But it's those, I guess, it's generation attitudes which you know, just, I guess, continue, don't they? And maybe why, you know, the book Dear Mother and all the different letters are important, you know, like I mentioned before. And actually, the conversation we're having, it kind of flows quite nicely into letter number 13, which is Dear Mothers Struggling to Be Fair. And oh my goodness, I love the way you wrote this chapter, because the drama or the role play thing that you play out, I was like, how many times have I been in this situation where I'm like, oh, how do I deal with this particular thing? Or someone wants one toy, someone wants this sweet. It could be any, you know, random kind of situation. And yeah, and I love the way that you presented that, you know, and there's a subheading called, you know, an age-old problem, and this idea of a fairness test. So yeah, I guess, you know, just on that that letter, what, yeah, I mean, we've talked a little bit about this idea of equity and justice, but how do we do that as parents? Because we know fairness is, I guess, it's a spectrum, right? So how do we navigate that?
It's such a hard one, isn't it, Imran? And I was laughing because I've been caught in that when they were little so many times. And I think the main point I was making, there were two main points in that letter. Okay, one was this whole childhood fair, everything's counted out exactly. You know, and we do our best, right? We do our best, but when they're little, it's quite simple in some ways, because it's, you know, small objects, or it's the number of, you know, the type of ice cream or whatever, and you can kind of get around it. But it's making the point that we should be fair, absolutely, we should be fair, but it doesn't have to look identical. So what one really needs is different to what the other child really needs. And so it's getting them to understand slowly as they get older, very gradually, that fair can look different and it's still fair, right? The equality doesn't look the same. And the second point I was making in that letter, which is actually really quite a heavy, deep topic, and I kept coming across it with older women. And that was that they're like in their 70s, in their early 80s, and they've got baggage from when they were young about something that wasn't fair. You know, it might have been education, it might have been the situation, the economics of their family. There's so many issues that come up after all these decades. And over years, sort of listening, talking, and exploring all that, you realize that there's a lack of understanding of risk, and that risk is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there's only so much a parent can do. You know, one parent with 4 children, I mean parents as in, you know, mother or both parents, single parent, whatever the situation is, when they've got 4 children, their life is not going to be static. There's going to be economic ups and downs, different types of tests. They're going to be health tests, possibly. We don't know. There's like a whole number of different rubrics that will affect each child's life differently. And when I hear that some really elderly people being still, you can tell they still are not resolved always about how the cookie crumbled. Sometimes you realize it. Their lives would be much easier if they've understood risk, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has written a certain amount for me and for you and for our siblings, and it's not always going to be the same. So there's the 2 sides to that letter: the childhood side, you know, wanting fairness, and that's an innate need in all of us, right? We're human, everybody wants fairness. But at the same time, the other side of that coin is we're not going to have identical to each other. So fairness isn't identical. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to test us in different ways. He's going to withhold certain things from one sibling that he's going to give to another one. He's going to give that sibling something else that isn't going to come to the other one. And we can't blame these poor parents always. Right? I'm quite, you know, I really do push back every time parents are guilt tripped about a whole range of things. Because by and large, I'm not talking to exceptions here, you know, obviously we're not condoning anything wrong or abuse of any sort, but by and large, talking to the middle, parents are doing their best.
And that's all. I think that's all we can.
They're doing their best and not trying to make their children's lives vastly different.
Exactly.
But risk comes into it. So that's why a large part of that letter is about risk. And, you know, what has Allah written for us?
And I think you capture that whole essence so beautifully. I mean, it was such a, I really had to stop as I was reading and reread, you know, about that, because it was such a beautiful reminder. And you also you mentioned that you're not to confuse kind of individuality with the harm of individualism. But yeah, again, this idea of risk, and actually makes me think, because obviously we're in now the month of Zulhijjah, and we know the story of Sayyidina Hajar, and obviously what happens in terms of her being left with, you know, her son Ismail in this kind of barren land, and the risk that Allah gives her, that we now every year go and perform Hajj, and we literally walk in her footsteps, you know, when we're doing Safa Marwa. What a status to give to a mother, but also the conviction in your faith to know that all the risk that comes from Allah. And you know, I think it's such a powerful thing, and to be able to share, I guess, an aspect of that with our children. So at a younger age, yeah, you're right. You know, the way that you tackle it in the letter, this idea of things about being fair, you know, things about fairness but not being identical, and you know, and as I guess our children are growing up, how we kind of explain to them what risk actually means, and how we might see that playing out in our lives is so important. But yeah, no, I mean, thank you so much for writing this particular letter, for writing all the letters. I think, Dear Mother, Letters from the Heart, truly, truly is a book I can tell that's been written, from the heart, and may connect, with other hearts as well, inshallah. And I mean, we've got a couple of minutes left, and I guess I just wanted to ask all the listeners who might be, really interested in following your work and, getting a copy of the book, how is best for them to do that?
Yeah, thanks, Imrana. Well, the fastest way to get the book at the moment is through Q Publishing. The other online stores all release it around the middle of July. So, yeah, if you log into Q Publishing, they have an Eid al-Adha special offer going on as well. You can get it for a little bit less, as well as many other brand new titles, amazing titles out there that they've released this month. And about this book, mostly active on Instagram. So that's the rooted_writer, or my Facebook page, which is my name. Part of writing this, though, I definitely want to give a shout out to the editor, Dr. Lubaba Al-Azami. She came in to the whole manuscript editing after I'd finished, and she was absolutely brilliant, mashallah. So there was, a really good, thorough process she put it through. So this is a real team effort. It's not just me writing the letters. There's an editor there. There's
Absolutely.
who had her own experience of motherhood and her own perspective. She's a different generation to me, which was great. I actually, in the process of writing this, became a grandmother, alhamdulillah. So, we've all at two different ends.
Thank you so much, Suma. We're just going to have to cut the show there, but thank you so much for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Imrana. Assalamu alaikum.
Salam, this is Prince Abdi, and keep listening to Inspire FM